Hello, how are you?
I'm doing quite well.
Thank you so much for coming and giving me your time.
No
Uh,
problem, no problem.
I want to ask you tell us what your name is and how old you are.
Okay. Well, my name is Alegria Lopez, and I am 18 years old.
Mhm.
19. 19. A few months ago, turned 19.
Very nice. And what I'm interested in that you have lived
Hmm.
in many countries, right?
Yeah.
You were born in Venezuela.
Germany.
Okay, you were born in Germany. So can you tell us
Germany.
the path how
Okay.
until
A
today?
little bit of the travel.
Yeah.
Well, my parents were in Germany for 7 years,
Mhm.
and I was born there and then we left Germany when I was 4. Um, then we moved to Venezuela, and we stayed there from when I was 4 to when I was about 11. But I went to a German school over there, so I still had like a lot of contact with the German culture
Mhm.
through that school. And then when I was 11, we moved over here to the U.S. and we've just been here since.
So you haven't lived in Venezuela at all.
No, I did 4 to 11.
4 to 6. And how what do you feel more? What do you think home is for you? Was it Germany for some years?
Oh, I mean, for me, home is just wherever I kind of am.
Okay,
That's just where home is gonna be.
okay. And what do you think? What are the positives of moving from one country to the next? And do you think is there some negative in it, or mostly you take it in your stride and keep moving?
I mean, excuse me. One of the nicest thing about it is honestly just being able to learn like new languages and
Mhm.
being able to communicate with
Mhm.
people from different places.
Mhm.
Even though, because I wouldn't have been able to communicate with people from Germany if I had not been born there, because why would I learn German in that
Mhm.
case? Or
Mhm.
I wouldn't have been as good as I am in Spanish if I
Mhm.
hadn't lived in Venezuela.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't have been able to communicate with, for instance, some of my family members and that kind
Mhm.
of stuff. Um, and I also think it's just a really good just like experience overall to know what the regular living of other people is in other parts of the world. Just as also just awareness to realize, oh, I would not do that in my culture, but in this culture it is normal.
Mhm.
And
So
well, I still think there's a little bit of negatives there too, because sometimes you can feel a little bit like lonely or like a little bit of doubt and be like, well, where is home actually for me? Because I'm definitely not German to
Mhm.
be German enough to be German. I'm not Venezuelan enough. Like when I compare myself to my Venezuelan family or even people that are from Venezuela, I'm like, I don't really do those things or I don't act that way. I do speak the language. I technically am Venezuelan, like by my birth certificate, but a
but
little bit of a disconnect there.
so you've lived in the United States for 7 years now?
Yeah,
Okay,
almost actually just 8 years
8 years.
this June.
Okay, so
Yep.
you are quite American in your ways, especially the way you speak. At least the contrast. But you saying that you can be Venezuelan
Uh huh.
in when you're in your home. Is that right?
Yeah.
When you're talking to parents, and how do you switch codes?
I mean, I don't think I really would consider myself American either,
Okay.
honestly,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of things where I lean more Latin
Mhm.
than Americans. Like, for instance, just like with your interactions with
Mhm.
people. Sometimes in the American culture, it's quite common for you to just have a very close inner circle, and that's the only people you interact with.
Mhm.
Well, I really don't like to do that because I like knowing lots of people and still having like an inner circle, but still knowing lots of people.
Mhm.
Mm, like, wait, can you give me the question again?
Okay, the question is like, how do you suppose you just stepped
Switches.
out, like you were
Okay.
inside your home talking to grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
talking to grandma and your mother, and then you go all of a sudden you get on your bike and go to school and you're talking and hobnobbing with American people. So how much time or effort does it take for you to switch from being a Latin person to American, or do you have to be either or?
I mean, with English and Spanish,
Yeah.
I think it's gotten to a point where I can just do a seamless translation, unless I'm doing it for a really, really long time. For
Mhm.
instance, I translate the church that I go to, right?
Mhm.
And that is from English to Spanish. When
Mhm.
it's from English to Spanish, I think I just have a little bit of a harder time because my vocabulary is just a lot more bigger in English
Mhm.
compared to Spanish. So it does take me a minute, but then it'll take me like a few minutes to get used to it, and I'm just like, just go with it. And then to go back from just like being talking in Spanish for like an hour straight to
Mhm.
go back to English, it does take me a little bit. It takes me a little minute too. Like I remember, but I think now it's gotten a lot better. When I was in middle school, though, as soon as I got home, I would spend like a few minutes talking with my mom in English, and then I would just slowly translate back into Spanish. So
Do you think is it can be exciting or exhausting sometimes from switching one language to the next, or you do it without knowing? You just your mind just does it.
I mean, for me, it's my mind that does it.
Oh, okay.
But for instance, as I said, I did learn like most of my education was in Spanish. I mean, not Spanish, in German.
Mm-hmm.
I barely had any education in Spanish at all, actually. I got a lot better actually here in the US because I was taking a literature class in Spanish. So I had to read in Spanish. So I was like, oh my goodness, I really need to learn Spanish a lot. But for instance, in German, even though I did most of my education in German, in the German language, not literally in Germany, I do have like that little moment where I'm like, oh, what is that? What's that word in German? And then I have to do a little bit of translating. But I think with that one is just like I fell out of practice with it. So definitely, if I work towards it, I think I could make it almost as seamless. Because what happened with English and Spanish now is what I was able to do when I was a kid with German and Spanish.
And how about education system? Like you were in middle
Oh, the
school,
best
maybe
one was
elementary.
Germany by far.
Yeah. How? Tell us the difference between Germany and
Well,
America.
my first example, and it's a little bit funny, is like for instance geometry stuff that I did. That you're technically supposed to do 11th grade here, according to Florida system. I did it in 10th grade though because I was like a year ahead. No, yeah, 10th grade. It was geometry and like like the whole volume things and the mass. I had just started learning that in 5th grade when I was under the German education system.
Oh wow.
There was a lot more drive in it. It's also just like I think that's also just like a German thing. Like Germany, I feel like they're very driven to know to understand things. So they're always like seeking knowledge. Where here in the US, it's a little bit more lax. You can like there's a lot of jobs that you can do even without going to university, for instance. While in places like Venezuela, going to university is literally life changing. Like my parents on both and my parents, yeah, they were both the first in their family that went to an actual university. For my dad's end, I think his dad did go into like vocational school, like as a teacher. I'm not too sure about it, whether he went to university though, but he did vocational school. My grandma though, which I'm really close to, and I've gotten to hear a lot of the stories. My parents were the first people that were actually my mom, my aunt, and my uncles were the first people in their family to actually like go out of their small town and go into university, and was a very big change. My grandma still brags about them. Like it's like basically saying, "Oh, my kids got into Harvard. They got in the top one school of Venezuela."
So it's a big deal to go to university in Venezuela.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it means a lot.
In terms of status, or
in terms of status, in terms of how much money you can make, in terms of where you live and all that kind of stuff, it does make a big difference.
So you're saying that in America you can still be okay without going to university.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which is pretty interesting. You can do like vocational school, you can get certificates and all this kind of stuff that you can do, and you can still make money and you can still live well without.
Which is not true in Venezuela without the college degree.
In current Venezuela, it's a little different.
But in Germany, you said that it's interesting and you like it better than here in terms of education.
I do actually. I think I am. I think I got a little bit of burnt out, probably. But I think I'm a pretty good student for the most part. I like learning. I like reading. The only thing I really don't like is homework. I do think that's foolish. Why don't I just do it at school? But besides that, I do feel like I was a lot more motivated to do well in school while I was under the German education system because it's a lot more rigorous. Like even though I had friends of mine that they absolutely sucked at math. I honestly don't even know how they ended up in that class. Probably through some expenses or whatever not. But because these kids could not do like 4 times 7, they were like, what? Anyways, I was not the brightest. But I do feel a lot like very driven to do things, to get stuff done. Like you would do, like I feel like you actually got stuff done in school.
Right. So
while here it's
more homework and a little bit more laid back here, right?
A lot more laid back.
Some people would actually like that, but you think it's better to work hard when you in school, right?
I like both.
Like
I think there has to be a balance. I don't want to.
Right.
Totally I don't think it's good to like work like the whole entire 8 hours that you're in school because then you're gonna get burned out, and that on top of homework sucks. But just enough to get you going, that you're actually learning. I feel like a lot of here don't really learn.
What do you think? As a 19-year-old kid, you also work. I know you work.
Oh yeah.
Is that a thing in Germany? Do you have to work to support yourself, or you don't really? If only if you
In
want to,
Germany,
while in
I mean, yeah,
college.
I think there's a lot more independence. In Germany, I
Mm.
feel. I'm pretty sure because it's interesting because you can basically vocational school. You can either choose to go into vocational school or into university, and you basically kind of choose your path really, really early on. If I had stayed in German system, I was a fifth grader, literally was starting gymnasium. So that would mean I probably would have decided what path I wanted to take. And that would change your classes a little bit. Like, for instance, like in middle school and high school, you would take classes depending on whether you want to do vocational school or whether you want to go to university.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the last 2 years of studies, you would either, if you're doing vocational school, you would kind of take like an internship in whatever job you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
While if you're going to university, you would go ahead and like get started a little bit like on uni stuff. As for like job wise, I'm not really too sure.
Mm-hmm.
I did leave when I was fairly young, and I'm not too sure actually. No, no, I know like in Germany it's a lot. For instance, education, it's a lot more common for people to just literally study.
Okay. One more question. I know
Mm-hmm.
you. Some other different cultures have different
Mm-hmm.
ideas about living with your parents or grandparents. Is generational living okay in Germany or Venezuela versus here, or is it looked down upon? Oh, you are now 19 or 20, you should move out. Is there a pressure there?
Germany,
Yeah.
very independent in that case.
Okay.
People actually go out of their way
Right.
to do it. There's even I know like there's like laws and everything that you can live by yourself by the time you're 16.
Mm-hmm.
And like it doesn't even have to be like an emancipation where here you have to like, oh, you have to be 18 and then your parents can kick you out type thing.
Right.
No, kids will go out of their own way to go and like live independently, for instance with some friends or whatever not, and just like not live with their parents. Here in the US, very interesting. Like their kids literally get kicked out at 18, and nobody gets spared. It was actually really funny. I have a little story on that
Please
because
tell us.
so my junior year of high school, I knew like this kid from youth. He was special needs, so he was a little bit older actually than 18, but he was still finishing high school, and so he graduated a year before me. Uh, and it was really interesting because he graduated and everything. We thought he would stay with his family or something, but no, they sent him off into like a boarding. I don't know what it was. It was like I don't know if it was like a university, a special living facility. Where he would live with other people that were also special needs. But then he would also work and like study and like do things so like he could live more independently. And it was really interesting because they were like, not even the special needs kid gets spared of living without their parents, or like just even just going off the whole thing with like going off to college, where a lot of I think the majority of my friends that are literally just like they don't they only go to the parents sometimes during the holidays. I think that is crazy to me, and they just go off to college, like literally go off and like don't even live with their parents or anything. Well, in that Venezuelan culture, very common to live multiple generations in the same household.
Yeah. Also, is it otherwise that like if you move out, they might get upset like, oh, why can't you live with us?
They might. It also kind of just depends a little bit. In my family's case, as I said, my mom's generation, like her and her siblings were the first to move out and go to university, very much driven by my grandma. So my grandma, for instance, she does not mind the fact that her kids don't literally live with them. However, she does still expect a lot of interaction with them. Like everybody has to be home for Christmas. You can't skip out. It's basically a Thanksgiving. We try to visit her at least once during every vacation that I had when I was a kid. Same with my dad's family. If we did Christmas with my grandparents from my mom's side, we do New Year's with my dad's family side. We would go visit them whenever I had like summer break, when I had winter break, all that stuff.
So spring as a kid, too. Thank you. As a kid who has lived in so many different countries, speaks different languages, and um, and negotiated different cultures, what would you advise to an incoming student from a different country in America? What do you think? How do you navigate like going to school or college in a different country and dealing with a different culture, different language? is should they be scared? Should they enjoy? What's your advice?
Ooh, I mean, culture shocks are interesting to me because when I was very young, I did like a whole shift from like Germany to Venezuela. So when I moved over here, actually there was not like an in your face culture shock, for
Right.
instance. But there was like very small things that I was like, what?
Yeah.
They didn't just what?
Give an example.
Example for well, the first thing I could think of is just that honestly I kind of do miss is like food wise. Like everything here has sugar. Everything here is sweet. Like I would joke around it with my parents that even the cheese here is sweet. Like if you take a mozzarella piece from here and you compare it to like an Italian mozzarella,
Not.
it's not. It ain't the same first and foremost, but it tastes too
There's a
sweet.
lot of sugar here, right?
A lot of sugar here everywhere. So I do definitely sometimes do miss the food from like either Germany or Venezuela. Also, let me see another
Going back to the question, like, do you think
advice.
should they take everything in their stride, or what's the best advice for a newcomer?
I mean, I just think definitely like just be open to like learning how their way of life is. It can be quite different from most culture. I think American culture is pretty unique because there's no really like solely American culture because everybody's that's here in the US has been an immigrant at one point or another, even if they themselves haven't. It's either the great 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 grandparents, like even the first like American settlers, they were immigrants. So I don't think there's really like a set culture in America, but there's a pattern. I don't know how to explain that. For instance, like going back with like the whole, well, one example I can think of is like skinship wise. Like Latin culture, very skinship. We hug because we do a lot of skinship. In America, not that culture. So a lot of times I've had some of my friends be like, back up, back up.
Right.
So that's interesting because like that's a kind of like a way that you show love and that you show affection to other people. It's like hug them, high five them, be like all over each other type thing. But
I've noticed. Thank you. I've noticed a lot of people who come from different countries. They try to cling on to their own people, and then like create their own bubble and live within that for the 4 years and never get to experience other like outside of their culture. Do you think is that a good strategy, or they should mingle with other people from all over the world, people, American people, eat the food, speak the language, and participate in their religious? What do you think?
I think it should be a little bit of both. I mean, it's really hard to understand the US and just understand what being American, quotation marks, means if you literally just only spend time with people from the same culture as you. While it can also still be really, really hard as somebody that's not from the American culture to go into it because it's not like they're completely closed off to other people, but there's definitely other countries that are way more welcoming towards people that are not exactly like them.
Right.
I know that's a really big problem, especially for younger kids. For me, I was in middle school. So yeah, I was a nerd. I was just reading books. Honestly, I didn't really care. But some of my closest friends, actually, they are like second, third generation, mostly second generation, like of Hispanic parents' kids. So like they may have been born like, for instance, in Cuba or in Puerto Rico, but they were literally raised the whole entire lives here in America. And like actual American friends, I have a few. They're fun people. They're really, really welcoming. That's honestly the reason why I am friends with them. They were like really open, really awesome to be around. But like for instance, some of the places I was living at there, and also many of the reasons why we like as a family moved. Like when we first got here to the U.S., we went to Miami, huge Venezuelan community population, lots of them. Literally, you go into any store and it's more likely that the clerk is going to speak in Spanish than in English.
So you don't have to speak English if you don't want to. Right?
Literally, So my parents, they were like, we don't really want that. We came here to the U.S. to like learn English, so we moved to Orlando, not Orlando first. And over there, we didn't have such a similar problem. Maybe a little bit like with church, because like if you want to go to a Spanish church, you're never gonna learn English because they don't do anything in English. But if you go to a English-speaking church, sometimes it was a little bit hard because like my parents, obviously the first language is not English, so they had a little bit of a hard time there. But they were able to make a lot more connections with American people through that church. And then from there, we went to Kissimmee, which was mostly a Latin ghetto, like literally the community where we were at. 97 75%. So somewhere between 75 and 90% of them were Spanish speakers. So that was good for my grandparents, first and foremost. They were learning English when they got here about 3 years ago, but they were still able to do a lot of the communication in Spanish, right? For my parents and I, it was kind of still the same because the church we went to was in English. A lot of the things that my dad had to deal with in work-wise is English and Spanish. My mom dealt a little bit with both. She has like people that only speak English, and people that only spoke Spanish back over there. But when we moved over here, it's literally most people just speak English, and not just English. For instance, there's a lot of Indian people here, so you guys do speak another language, but it's not the same language as us. So the only way we can communicate is through English.
English is the connecting language, right?
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I'm curious about you. Can you start a sentence in English, put some German in the middle, and finish with Spanish?
Oh yeah, I could totally do that.
Can you do one? Say something about the weather or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, die Sonne is really bright. Oi. It sounds really funky because grammatics.
What would
grammatics is funny.
What do you say?
The sun is really bright today.
Very good, nice.
Oi.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time.
All right,
it was really fun talking to you. And
no problem. Hope I was of help.
Thank you.
All right.